Hey sis, they say that history repeats itself. Today in our modern society, links can be made to how patriarchy has historically been used to control women, their lives, and most importantly, their bodies and reproductive rights. This historical repetitive pattern became very evident in a key section of the book, The Sibyls, the First Prophetesses of Mami Wata by Vivian Hunter-Hindew, also known as Zogbe. In the era of the Sibyl women, via her research, she has confirmed that Black women were the world leaders, which I covered in my first essay, What If I Told You God Was a Black Woman? And if you are catching this on Substack, then there will be a direct link to that in this written essay. If you are on YouTube listening to this, I will link it in the description box for you below. And my other essay, Apparently, there was a time Black women were protected. Again, on Substack, it's directly there for you. If you are on YouTube, I will link it down below. In these first two essays, I presented the main claims the author's research makes about Black women. Firstly, Black women were actually the guiding global force in terms of rulers before Christianity and all Abrahamic religions came along. Second, the creation of the Catholic and Christian faiths have been plagiarized and built off of the prophecies, the Sibyl women. Their workings were used globally as guidance to rule. The guidance came from the god, in quotation marks, they referred to as a goddess called Mami Wata. Thirdly, that the Vatican, linked to the Catholic Church in modern day Italy, is a stolen seat, she calls it, by white European men in order to construct a new world order using religion to wipe out the historical existence of the Black Sibyl women and at the same time claim global control, male patriarchy, via the use of religion. Now, these are pretty big claims, but from her extensive research in this section of the book I'm referring to, Mama Zogbe maintains the argument that class and race wars are new. Gender war is the original war against women that started with Black matriarchal rulers who were located not just in Africa, but across what we now consider modern day Europe. Now, a disclaimer here. As always, the purpose of my work and writing about what is exposed in this author's work is not to argue whether this author is wrong or right, or whether we should believe her or not. It's simply to bring awareness to Black women about this part of our history and imprint this into our consciousness. Secondly, it's to wake women up to see how and where male leaders of today use three main areas, spirituality, economics, and politics, to control women and their lives. It's right in front of our eyes to see from a historical view, based on the work by this author. And presently, when we look at what male leaders like Donald Trump, for example, have been doing on a macro level, he has been trying to control women, mainly American women, or his government at least has been trying to. And on a micro level, we see the control via male XY movements like the manosphere, both the Black and the white sections of this. This is what women need to be wise to. The patriarchal revolts, historical gender wars against Black women. So from page 50 onwards of the book, the author, who I will refer to now as just Mama Zogbe, states that the first women to experience gender wars against them were Black women. This may seem surprising when we think about this, because many would assume that it was white women who experienced the first gender wars if we consider the different waves of feminism that we've had from the very start up until today. What Mama Zogbe highlights is that it goes back further than this. War against women actually started in Africa while women were leaders. The European men, the colonizers, who influenced or gave Black African men, the natives of the land, the idea, in quotation marks, to revolt against the current setup in society at the time that had been in place for thousands of years in this part of the world. The setup in society with women as rulers spread its influence across what we know now as modern day Europe, as mentioned. In ancient times, it would appear that the world resembled much more closely to the laws of the animal and nature world that we see today, with women, or the females in nature and also in the animal world, as the leaders while men follow their lead. The details of the actual goddesses and the Sibyl women themselves can be found in more detail in my first essay. So where did it all start? What location? So according to this author's research, the downfall and patriarchal revolt against female leadership actually started in Egypt, according to her. She states in her book, and this is a direct quotation, historians of ancient Egypt were describing Egypt's rise as a global military power. They often assume this was done on an amicable joining of Upper and Lower Egypt under the king Menes, hailing this event as the greatest political achievement in Egyptian history. This monumental event, the claim, began the golden age of military conquest and global expansion, unchallenged rule of Egypt's patriarchal pharaohs. She goes on to say, and according to most, it established Egypt's inevitable position as a legitimate world power. However, that is the view of history provided by the patriarchs. Upon closer examination and in considering the historical evidence from the view of the matriarchs, this indicates that this amicable joining, meaning of Egypt, might not have been such a crowning achievement in Egypt's history at all, but rather the opposite. This is from the book, The Sibyls, the First Prophetesses of Mami Wata, from page 50 onwards. How they took power from the women. What Mama Zogbe is explaining here in this paragraph, to break it down, is that this part of history we were given about Egypt is only based on what the patriarchs or the men of the time and even male historians of today want us and the world to believe. She then goes on to argue that the patriarchs or the men of the time to overturn the women, the black Sibyls, in order to stake their claim and dominate. The black women were ordered, in quotation marks, to serve under European gods such as Apollo and Zeus, I believe this is pronounced, which we all know are Greek or white male European gods. The continuation of this is how black women's history was stolen and rewritten. All of their efforts, meaning the black Sibyl women, they were placed into male roles, male gods, and of course, they all started to appear in the Catholic and Christian religion. So why is this rewriting of female history relevant today? So as we can see, these men were very clever in their attack. Not only did they fool black men into thinking that if they overturned their own women, they would get a slice of control, they used other clever ways via spirituality or religion, economic and political ways to move into control, to remove the female leadership up until today. So the males did this in their gender wars at that time by creation of new religions, introducing male gods, and then the most important one, I think, is creating the Bible, which gives clear instructions on women's oppression. If you look at it closely, they overtook their lands, giving them less economic power in terms of how they do business on their own land at the time, and of course they created some new laws. If we look at these three main ways, spiritual, political and economic, that the white European males managed to overthrow the women and fall another group of men, it can also be applied to the world today. And this is the part that women need to sit up and be conscious of. So we have modern day control of women, spiritual, political, economic ways. Firstly, the right wing and Christian man as spiritual control of women. We have had a rise globally of politically leaning right-wing and Christian men. We see it in the manga movement across the USA. We see it in the manosphere, especially the white section of it. And we also see a rise of easily fooled black men turning to right-wing political ideology in the black manosphere, which we could say translated into their increased votes for Trump's administration if we apply this to the black manosphere in America, thinking that white men are somehow going to give them a slice of that patriarchal pie. The question is, when are they going to learn? History shows black people, and especially black men, that traditional patriarchy, which was created by white men and has been used to dominate not only black people, but also white women, was not designed to include them as a group of men, meaning black men or any other man that is non-white. It was designed and is used to help subjugate them and every other member of society. The rise in the right-winged Christian black man or black men is them again chasing more fool's gold, which could be argued is historically a pattern for them when it comes to wanting a slice of traditional patriarchal pie for themselves so that they can control women. The use of the right-winged Christian men with traditional values is the same spiritual control used to overturn the civil women centuries ago, meaning that religion and conservative views have been used and still are being used to help justify things like, in the modern day, reduced access to an abortion, reduced access to contraceptives for women, a return to traditional values, as they like to call it, where women are chained to the kitchen sink with no rights. I've even heard word that in the USA, the thing that they call like a no-fault divorce stance was being attacked. Now, I don't know if this came to fruition or if it actually happened. This would make it harder for women to divorce men, just like in the old days, so that women are forced to remain in an unhappy marriage and or with abusive men because they can't use certain rules or things like the no-fault divorce stance. The use of spiritual control over women is the number one reason why women, especially black women, need to be very careful when aligning themselves with oppressive viewpoints towards women that are clearly held in both and all of the religions, such as Christian, Catholic, and even Islamic faiths. This is key for women to recognise, especially black women, as it could be said, and it could be argued quite well, that black women are highly likely to be Christians, as it's something that has been embedded in black culture and black people since we were on the plantation. Other than physical force into chains and labour in the name of slavery, religion is a tool that has been and was used historically by white people to keep black people's minds as well as their bodies enslaved, teaching our ancestors that they are cursed and it's God's way to have such things as slavery, and that black people are in the position that the good Lord intended. Traditional values and economic control of women. So according to Mama Zogbe's extensive research, economic control was used to overthrow the matriarchal rule across Africa and a majority of what we now know as Europe before Abrahamic religions like Christian, Catholic and Islam came along. To place this into context of the modern day, the rise of traditional values in men has led to women's economic freedoms being placed at risk. How do we see this? Firstly, traditional values, as they like to call it, upholds the ideology that women belong at home, caregiving for children and husbands, things like working, earning and educating themselves with degrees, which is something that black women have been doing in high numbers, do not align with men and their traditional values or roles for women. Meaning, this form of attack used in the past on the Sibyl women via their economical status to gain control and write them out of history can translate in today's context to, firstly, telling women that their education and degrees mean nothing unless they're married to a man. Now, this is the Black Manosphere's talking point, and it's a big one of theirs. So this economic control of women by discouraging their decisions to educate themselves, which is directly linked to the ability to have higher earnings or the potential for it, is a way of control. With lower earnings as a woman, we are more likely to be dependent on a man. So therefore, it could be argued that from an economical stance, meaning money, our survival, and our uptake of education to elevate ourselves, they are trying to place control over women right here in these areas with this particular talking point that the Black Manosphere has and that they use to brainwash black women away from education, away from earning more money, and gaslight them into thinking that they should dumb themselves down somehow and it's better for them to be married, to use their words. Another thing that we see when it comes to economic control is they're upset across both the black and white sectors of the manosphere regarding things like feminism, women's rights, and our ability to provide for ourselves. So the general dissatisfaction men show with women's rights and or feminism is because of how it impacts them, not us as women. This is something women need to remember and to be aware of. The upset with our rights and feminism is because it makes their traditional roles and traditional values, in quotation marks, that they like to use as men, being the ones that control all the money, as the ones that earn all the money, and women not having this right to do this, pretty redundant. Meaning, feminism has made men's economic control over women very redundant in many ways, but this is the main one that they have a problem with. Our rights and ability to provide for ourselves questions their roles in our lives, meaning, to use their words again and their terminology, they must bring more to the table. Their traditional role, in their view, is very redundant with women's ability to be independent and earn and look after herself. This is economic control over women that they are fighting for, again, because they are using the fact that women have a right to employment, equal pay, salaries, to open bank accounts, to buy houses, and to control their own money as something that, in quotation marks, upsets them, to use their words, in the manosphere, because of how much they can control you, me, cis over there, and any other non-black woman is reduced when we have these rights. The third area, when we look at the political control, women's bodies, motherhood, and the right to be child-free are all things that have become very political over the last few years. To give a global look at this, the French president seems to have shown that in this part of the world, women's bodies are their own when he changed the French laws to state that the right to an abortion will never be changed for women. This is something I wrote about in my previous essay. If you are catching this on Substack, it will be linked directly into this essay. If you are on YouTube, I will link it in the description box for you below. This was pressure from French feminists in response to Donald Trump's decisions to make women's bodies, their decisions over motherhood, his and every other white male's business in his government, rather than the business of individual women. If we apply women's bodies, motherhood, and the right to be child-free to the gender war tactics that Mama Zogbe mentioned, and how politics was at the time used to control these Sibyl women and overturn their matriarchal rule, we see it again in the modern day by making women's bodies and if or when or how they produce children a very political topic. We saw this when they overturned Roe versus Wade, which is the right to an abortion in the USA a few years ago. This is not the only part of the world that women's bodies have been placed on a political agenda. We see it in parts of Africa and even in the Arab countries and cultures where female genital mutilation is carried out. Now, the World Health Organization, the WHO, they made a statement and they said, this is direct quotation, more than 230 million girls and women alive today have undergone female genital mutilation, FGM, in 30 countries in Africa, the Middle East, and Asia, where FGM is practiced. So that's a direct quote from them, the World Health Organization, as of January 2025. So overall, what can be concluded further from this section of this wonderful book filled with research on Black women's history is that men have relied on three main ways to control women, it would appear: religion, economic progression, and political viewpoints and lawmaking. Women need to understand this and see it for what it is so that our advocacy, those of us who do advocate for ourselves and our rights and the rights of other women, can be focused in these areas when sneaky attempts are made to take away our rights, or even worse, do what they did to the Sibyl women, which was to rewrite their whole history and remove them from existence so that the natural order of matriarchal rule, something we see in nature and the animal world even to this day, is disrupted due to men's jealousy over women. In my next essay, I will be going a little bit deeper and looking at the spiritual element of oppression and how this has and still is impacting women. Black women who are highly likely to be religious really need to wake up to. So in no way am I saying do not have faith, do not believe. But what I am saying is have faith in the right things and get in touch with your own spirituality outside of Abrahamic religions, as this is used as a tool to oppress you. Men know it, and that's why they do it. So why can't we as women see it? Thank you so much for being here with me if you made it this far. If you do enjoy this kind of content and you are on YouTube, then please do consider subscribing or drop me a comment. Let me know your thoughts. If you are here on Substack with me, then thank you so much for being here. I will catch you in the next one too. Much love, the Black Woman Essayist.